I'm Maj Chanderkant, ex-Four Guards. I'm here at the Punjab Military Literature Festival, Chandigarh, to speak of my own and my battalion's experiences and actions in the 1971 war. Now, Brahmanbaria was the headquarters of Pakistani 14 Division, commanded by General Qazi Abdul Majid. After the Pakistani withdrawal of 27 Brigade and the Div headquarters from Brahmanbaria, they all concentrated at Brahmanbaria. I think they had a total of about 6,500 troops, one brigade and plus the Div headquarters troops, and a couple of tanks in Brahmanbaria. In our advance from Raipura, where we had crossed the Meghna River, towards Dacca, Brahmanbaria was in our rear and posed a threat to us. But fortunately, on the 10th of December, 19 Punjab had crossed over the river Meghna by ferries and had put a block south of Brahmanbaria and a Mukti Bani battalion north of Brahmanbaria. The remarkable thing is that these two battalions, without any artillery cover, for the rest of the war, for 7 days or 8 days, they contained 6,500 Pakistani troops who, throughout these 7 days, thought they were going to be attacked by our forces. During the day, the Indian Air Force fighter bombers, Nats and MiGs, not Nats, but Hunters and MiGs would drop, if they had no other target, would drop whatever ammunition they had on Brahmanbaria. And at night, it would be bombed by our transport aircraft, mainly the Caribous. They just pushed the bombs out into Brahmanbaria. Fortunately, by then, all the civilians had run away from there. And so, as far as Abdul Majid was concerned, the divisional commander of the Pakistanis, he thought that he was under, his position was going to be attacked, threat. He took no countermeasures. I think Abdul Majid was a coward. I had mentioned earlier that Brahmanbaria, in his Div headquarters, we had found the bodies of 6 of our men from 10 Bihar with their hands tied behind the back. He had shot them, plus 45 Mukti Bani people shot in the back with their hands tied in the back. That's not how a soldier should behave. 10th of December, it's an interesting thing. We had crossed the river on the 9th and 10th. On the 10th of December, according to Gavin Young, who was a reporter of the London Observer, I think, or the Telegraph, one of the British papers, reports that at 10 o'clock, after Niazi had heard of our crossing of the Meghna, he asked Yahya Khan and the United Nations representative in Dacca to seek a ceasefire, which means that Niazi knew that he had no troops to defend Dacca. Our path to Dacca was open. Now, Gavin Young is a very interesting person. There's a lovely photograph of him with General Jacob and General Niazi, titled The Surrender Lunch. He was there when Jacob met Niazi, and he writes about it. And he also writes that the war should have ended on the 10th of December, because that is when Niazi had thrown in the towel. It lasted for almost 1 week more and had needless more deaths and wounded and casualties. And he's absolutely right, because after the 10th, at least in our sector, we had many skirmishes on our advance to Dacca, but really there was no serious fighting. There were skirmishes. The advance continued on the 12th in all modes of transport. When the divisional commander saw that my battalion was now fully motorized, he requested the CO to shed half of the buses and trucks that we had for the rest of the brigade, which we did, but we still were completely motorized or on cycle rickshaws or something. And by the 12th evening, we had got to a place called Barpa, which is on the banks of the Lakha River, which is 12 kilometers from the heart of Dacca. About Barpa, General Bajwa in his book mentions about this location, that on the 12th evening we had occupied Barpa and our patrols had entered Demra, which is the ferry point of Dacca, and occupied the Adamji jute mills. On the 13th of December morning, we were joined by a party of 7 or 9 foreign journalists. The most prominent amongst them was Sidney Schanberg of the New York Times, who's written a wonderful story of his journey to join us. He's also covered part of the Garipur battle and also of the conduct of the Indian army. He speaks very highly of the Indian army. He says they did not, he saw an army, he says they did not, and he says he's seen the Americans in Vietnam, he has seen it. He says here was an army whose equipment was not very old and was not very modern, it was old, but they made the best use of it. And in their behavior and conduct with either the Pakistani soldiers or with the local population, they did not put one foot wrong. That's there on record on Sidney Schanberg's report published in the New York Times on the 17th of December. Something that we should all be happy and proud of. Along with Sidney Schanberg was the photographer of the German magazine called Stern. He's of Indian origin, called J. Olal. Both J. Olal and Sidney Schanberg report of the final battle into Dacca of the 13th and 14th. And the best part is, the same battle, one of the participants was a lady Mukti Bahani fighter. I forget her name, but I have a record and a video of hers recounting this final battle into Dacca at the Adamji jute mills. Both Schanberg and J. Olal talk of a Pakistani officer coming out with a large white handkerchief or towel and waving a white flag of surrender. This is before the official surrender. Other sectors, the fighting continued. In our sector, we had a few skirmishes. We suffered casualties, about 30 odd casualties we suffered. But those are in the dying embers of a flame, which still is warm and hot. But they were of no things. We knew by the 14th that the Pakistanis had no option but to surrender. Because on the 14th morning, Major Shamsher Mehta, squadron of tanks, PT-76 tanks, which included 2 Pakistani tanks, which can be distinguished from our tanks by the white band around their turrets, gun turret, and by the Urdu markings on their hull. J. Olal has photographed them of firing into it, and Sidney Schanberg has mentioned about how these Pakistani tanks are firing on the Pakistanis themselves. And I was particularly happy about it because these same tanks had tormented me and run over my own one platoon of mine on the 2nd of December. 15th morning, of course, the ceasefire talks had started. Talks had started earlier, so on the 10th that started, but we knew that the ceasefire is now on because by then 4 Corps had built up 3 brigades of 57 Div and 2 brigades of 23 Div on the outskirts of Dacca. We were waiting for our artillery to come in. and waiting for our further build-up ammunition. It's a whole thing, because fighting in a built-up area is not a cakewalk. You suffer casualties, so build-up had to take place. But we knew that the Pakistanis, by then, because we had captured a few Pakistani soldiers from the outskirts of Dacca, that they really didn't have anything to think. They had troops. They had a total of 27,000 troops, but they were mainly administrative troops. They had depended, General Niazi had depended that 27 Brigade from Bhairab Bazar would withdraw into Dacca, and the other brigade of Pakistan Army, which is from the northern sector, would have been able to withdraw into Dacca for the defense of Dacca. But that did not take place. One, it could not happen, because if they moved in the day, our Air Force would have shot them up. Secondly, they were pinned down in their own battles. And thirdly, movement at night, because of our own ambushes and the Mukti Bahani ambushes, the Pakistanis, for some reason, are reluctant to move at night. And this is something that we noticed not only in the eastern Bangladesh, but even in the western sector. Why it should be that way? But perhaps they did not take night fighting seriously in their training. On the 16th morning, orders were given, received. Sagat came himself. He came on the 15th, joined us. In fact, he came on the 13th first time, and then again on the 15th, and again on the 16th. Pilot, as usual, then Captain Sehota, and said, send a company to the race course, to the airfield or race course, I forget, to give a guard of honor to the army commander when he arrives. A company mounted on Shammi Mehta's tanks proceeded to the race course. Now the race course was overrun with the local Bengalis. Thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. First job of theirs was to clear the race course and empty out the space for the surrender thing to take place. Shammi Mehta's tanks, on which the foreign correspondents travelled. We have a very nice photograph of this foreign correspondents all mounted on the tanks. One of the tanks was placed outside the Dacca Intercontinental Hotel, which had been declared the Red Cross neutral zone, in which the erstwhile governor Malik was there, plus a lot of United Nations and foreign people had taken shelter. That was mounted there along with our troops. And this company that had been sent to give the guard of honor was then ordered to lay a protective cordon around the place where the surrender was to take place. The rest is history.
The advance to Dacca started. It was a race. It was a race to chase the Pakistanis. We were on their heels and they were running. There was hardly any opposition on the road axis. Now from Narsingdi to reach Dacca, there were two approaches. One was a road on which 311 Brigade was advancing on foot, helped by a few transports here and there, cycle rickshaws and any type of transport that they could get hold of, and supported by 65 mounted regiment, which deployed en route wherever there was some opposition, there was a requirement to fire. On the other axis, from Narsingdi, a railway line of middle gauge, it went firstly west and then south. Generally the direction was southwest. It entered Dacca via Dumbi. The 73 Brigade was given orders to advance on that brigade, and it was to be supported by 59 mounted regiment of ours. Now, the mounted regiment could not move on the railway line. They couldn't even push the guns. So, ingenuity was used to the extreme. We had, this regiment had one officer by the name of Percy Dice, Captain Percy Dice, who had earlier served in the railways. before being commissioned. He had some knowledge how to operate the train. Now he collected a few bogies on the railway line, joined them up, and also managed to start a derelict engine somehow. He hooked up the train and we christened that train as 59 Combat Special. That is after the name of the regiment. On this train, it had a number of bogies, covered wagons, it had flat wagons, and all sorts of wagons which came on the way were hooked up. The guns were deployed on the flat wagons, ammunition was put in the covered wagons. Initially the train was pushed by manpower, and later on when Percy managed to get an engine, then it was a proper train run by engine with telephone lines between the front and the rear wherever the train had to be halted and so on. This train marched on and the brigade advanced, and even the infantry was given an opportunity to put their heavy loads on the same train. Ultimately, on the 16th, when the ceasefire took place, this was the first train to land up in Tuki railway station near Dacca. I established my command post nearby at a place called Barpa, that village Barpa. Now, there I calculated from the map that the medium guns could reach the outskirts of Dacca. Now, in the meantime, I got a call from my commander and the GOC to meet them at Narsingdi. I drove back to Narsingdi in my auto, three-wheeler. I met them there and they gave me orders that you must shell Dacca to tell General Niazi, Pakistanis, that we are so close as to be able to shell you with our artillery. We are within artillery range of you. Okay, so that is, I thought of it, how do I do this? I acquired a town map of Dacca, and from the map I selected a few places where I suspected that the army barracks or the cantonment would be, or the defences of the Pakistanis would be. That is the close defences of Dacca. Now I selected those places as target. I also took care to avoid a few places which were declared as by the Red Cross, International Red Cross, as no targets. That means we were forbidden to fire on those places because the foreigners, international community, the various embassies and the other foreigners, that is Americans and nationals of other countries, had been told to gather, and that place was out of bounds as far as our artillery and Air Force was concerned. So avoiding those places, there were 9 places which I marked in red on my map. Now I selected the other places and I gave a task table to my medium guns, giving them enough ammunition and telling them to go all out to put as many rounds as possible into Dacca so that General Niazi can hear the bang of our guns. Apart from shelling Dacca outskirts with our artillery, the Air Force also came to know that the Governor Malik of East Pakistan was holding a conference in his residence on the 14th morning, 14th December. Now, immediately a mission got ready, a mission of 4 aircraft from Guwahati, and they were told to shell that place. And right in the middle of the conference, these fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force, they swooped down on the governor's house and they played merry hell into that building. And the governor and General Niazi and other generals and all the VIPs, they had to take shelter under the table, under the conference table. That is how they saved their life. Now, that was the last you can say, straw on the camel's back. The governor was totally shaken and he resigned then and there on an ordinary piece of paper and gave it to General Niazi. He says, hereby, I am no more your governor, you are in charge. And he went away to Intercontinental Hotel, which was a neutral area. And thereafter, Niazi, the choice was left to Niazi to accept the surrender offer or decide to fight. Now, there was no fight left in Niazi. Thereafter, he raised the hand, and in the meanwhile, we all know how General Jacob landed up on the 15th or the 16th morning in Dacca, and he browbeat Niazi into signing the surrender document, into agreeing to sign the surrender document. Now, that is how the whole game ended.
I am Brig PK Ghosh, VRC VSM, commissioned in the Corps of Signals. On 14th morning, the advance started, and Brigadier Clare, who was the brigade commander, made it very clear that look, 2 corps has made some progress, but it's still nowhere near Dacca. 4 corps, having crossed Meghna, is making good progress. They may take another few days to reach Dacca, but we got a clear run, I think, because the enemy has fallen back, could not take up defences at Tangail to delay us further, and now possibly has withdrawn to Dacca. So I expect no more resistance from between Tangail and Dacca. That was his assessment. The advance started on 14th, and on 15th evening, I had put my boys with the radio sets, and they had very high frequency sets, they had high frequency sets, and they had ground to air communications. I said to start monitoring all the frequencies. By this time, if you will recall, those who have been following this, from the 11th or 12th onwards, General Sam Manekshaw, or Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw, had started sending a message to Niazi to surrender. That would be honorable way of surrendering. Indian Army will follow all the customs and traditions of war. You've lost the battle. No need to prolong the agony for all concerned. This message was constantly going through all the media, and Pakistani Army was obviously getting it. On 15th evening, one of my boys intercepted a message on high frequency from General Niazi to all troops to say that he had decided to lay down arms immediately, and they would have to follow his orders. So now we were assured that the Eastern Army, Pak Army, was completely deflated. We decided to press home for Dacca, but our worry was whether the forward troops who we would meet as soon as we approached Dacca had got that message or not. I recall that on 16th morning, we had reached Mirpur Cant. There was the Mirpur Creek in front of us, and there was the Mirpur Bridge. At this time, 2 Para Battalion was leading the advance. We halted just short of this, and we took stock of the situation. And it was the view that Mirpur Bridge was primed for detonation. They would blow it up in our faces and not allow us to enter Dacca. Some confabulation took place between General Clare and the battalion commanders, and the sum total of it was that we decided that instead, to avoid confusion, we would send an officer with a white flag to Mirpur to tell them that look, this is the message Niazi had sent you all. You must lay down arms, no need to fight anymore, and we will take over the entire situation. Nirbhay Sharma then was the adjutant of 2 Para, who later on rose to be the Lieutenant General Nirbhay Sharma, Master General of Ordnance. and later on he was the governor of Arunachal and Mizoram as well. Nirbhay took a jeep, raised a white flag, went off at a fast clip to Mirpur. We were watching through binoculars. He was immediately apprehended by the troops over there. And when he explained the situation, first of all they didn't believe him. Eventually he prevailed, as it transpires, and he was taken to the headquarters near the Ramna race course, where he explained that our troops had already reached Mirpur and he must send somebody from the headquarters to Mirpur to tell the troops to lay down their arms now. We did not want any bloody fighting at this point of time. General Jamshed, the GOC-16 Pak Dev, came along back with Nirbhay, in fact to Mirpur to receive us. And we all entered Dhaka with 2 para leading. I was very much there, just in the leading elements. At 9:30 I recall, we entered Dhaka, being the first troops, Indian troops to enter Dhaka on that day. Just as an aside, just for a matter of interest, General Sagat, who was the GOC 4 Corps, and he was just a few hours away from Dhaka, saying that he was now in charge of the entire situation in East Pakistan. Nobody was to make any more advances without his orders. However, we sensed that Brigadier H.S. Clare saw the prize before him and he was not going to let go. So we ignored that order, we pressed on, and at 9:30 we entered Dhaka. By about 10 o'clock, we had reached their headquarters, and Brigadier Clare and Colonel Pannu had met there General Niazi and his staff. We were there very much. We were offered a cup of tea by the Pak Army. Rest of the troops had gone to the race course and set up their barracks over there, bivouacs over there. A telephone conversation ensued between Brigadier Clare and Headquarters Eastern Command, and it was decided that General Jacob would fly in immediately, which he did within a few hours. And that is the time it was decided. Then Jacob laid down the procedure that would be followed, that the instrument of surrender would be signed. The protocol being that the event would take place in a public domain, in a public space, with the public watching. And it was decided to go for the race course, which is quite close to the Hotel Intercontinental, Dhaka Intercontinental. And General Arora would come in at the appointed time, fly in directly from Calcutta. He would be received by General Niazi. 2 contingents would be formed. One, the Indian contingent, formed by 2 para-battalion officers, JCOs and men, and one, a Pak Army contingent. They would be inspected by General Arora. And then both Niazi and Arora would proceed to the table laid out in front of this contingent, where the instrument of surrender would be signed. By 4 o'clock, General Arora had come, and General Niazi ceremonially handed over his pistol to General Arora, and I was a part of the Indian contingent. They inspected both the contingents. General Niazi saluted General Arora, and they moved to the table to sign the famous instrument of surrender, which the picture has become since so famous, the 1971 war, the signing ceremony. With that ended, of course, our part in the war.